She was sold by her own father and forcibly taken to live with a stranger. The millionaire who bought her took her to his home, but it was not what it seemed. A forbidden love was born. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us following. Lara grew up in silence, the daughter of a man ruined by his choices and abandoned by a mother who disappeared when she was still 12 winters old. Her youth was marked by absences, averted glances, and the cruel realization that her birth had been an accident, not a gesture of love. Her only consolation was a reliquary left by her mother, an antique piece of silver decorated with a small painting of a couple. The woman sleeping, the man awake and visibly guilty. From a young age, Lara wondered if her mother had loved anyone other than her father. From an early age, she suspected that love was not what she had been taught. At 19, still a virgin and discreetly beautiful, Lara was like an untouched flower in a barren land, something that should not have survived. She was unaware of the games, the debts, and the dangerous alliances that her father built in the shadows. The small house in Barbacena, in the interior of Minas Gerais, always smelled of cheap whiskey and despair. The peeling walls kept secrets that she never dared to ask, and her father, João Mendes, a 50-year-old man already worn out by life, could barely look her in the eye. On that Sunday morning in March, when the humid heat clung to her skin, like a promise of a storm, João woke Lara before sunrise. There was something different in his eyes, a mixture of relief and guilt that she had never seen before. He didn't explain anything, just said that she needed to get ready to put on the only pretty dress she owned, a navy blue one that had belonged to her mother. "Where are we going, Dad?" Lara asked, brushing her brown hair in front of the cracked bathroom mirror. "Solving some problems," was all he replied, lighting his third cigarette of the morning. João's old car hummed along the dirt road that led to the mountains. Lara watched the landscape change, the simple houses giving way to tall gates and ivy-covered walls. She was nervous, but she didn't know why. Her father didn't speak, just drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and kept glancing in the rear-view mirror as if someone was following them. When they arrived at the mansion, Lara felt short of breath. It was an imposing building of stone and dark wood, hidden among centuries-old eucalyptus trees and surrounded by ornate iron railings. Everything there smelled of old wood and restrained fear. Two men in suits were waiting at the main gate, and one of them waved discreetly to João. "Lara," her father said, turning off the engine and turning to her for the first time all drive. His eyes were red, not from drink, but from something worse. "You're going to be here for a while." "It's for the best." "What do you mean, Dad?" "I don't understand." "You don't have to understand. You just have to be a good girl like you always have been." Lara's hands shook as she held the locket around her neck. It was her habit when she was frightened to stroke the cool silver between her fingers. Something was wrong, very wrong. Her father had never taken her anywhere, had never cared where she was or what she did. And now, suddenly, she had to stay in an unfamiliar mansion. That was when she saw him for the first time. Rafael Vasconcelos emerged from the main entrance of the house like a shadow taking shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair already touched by a few strands of silver at the temples. He was wearing an impeccable white dress shirt and dark linen pants. But what impressed Lara most was not his elegance, but the weight in his eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had lost something important and was still searching for it. He approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, studying Lara with an intensity that made her blush. He didn't say a word, just nodded to João as if confirming a transaction. It was then that she understood. There was no negotiation, just a brief, heavy look and her father's nod, as if handing over an object. It was a deal, and she was the living currency. "Dad," Lara whispered, but João had already turned around, walking back to the car without looking back. Rafael held out his hand to her, an almost chivalrous gesture if not for the context. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and controlled. "Welcome to your new home, Lara." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than its exterior. Lara followed Rafael through the wide hallways, her footsteps echoing on the polished, wooden floor that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with huge paintings, each covered in white sheets like silent ghosts watching her arrival. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, but only a few bulbs were lit, creating dancing shadows that made everything seem even more mysterious. "Why are the paintings covered?" Lara asked, her voice sounding small in the vast space. Raphael stopped walking and turned to her. For the first time, she could see him up close. He had a small scar on his left eyebrow, and his hands were large, with long fingers that betrayed a natural elegance. But there was something somber in his expression, as if each word cost an effort. "Because some things are better forgotten," he replied simply, and continued walking. They passed a library that looked like something out of an old movie, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a wooden staircase on rails. The smell of old books and beeswax permeated the air. There was a mahogany table in the center, covered with papers and documents that Raphael quickly covered with a cloth when he noticed Lara's curious gaze. "This will be your room," he said, stopping before a carved wooden double door. The room was spacious and well lit, but there was something odd about it. Lara noticed immediately that there were no mirrors, not even on the antique dressing table that occupied one corner. The bed was huge, covered in white linen sheets and a hand-embroidered bedspread. The windows overlooked a garden that must have once been magnificent, but was now neglected, with wild rose bushes growing out of control and a stone fountain covered in moss. "Why are there no mirrors?" she asked, placing her small suitcase on the bed. "Because you don't need to look at yourself to know who you are," Raphael replied, and for the first time, Lara detected something close to kindness in his voice. He walked over to the window and stared out at the abandoned garden. His hands were clasped behind his back, and Lara could feel the tension in his shoulders. There was a melancholy about him that went beyond simple sadness. It was as if he carried the weight of 1,000 regrets. "What is my role here?" Lara asked, deciding to be direct. If she was going to live in this house, she needed to understand the rules of the game. Raphael turned slowly, and she saw something pass through his eyes, too fast to decipher. "You will be my companion at discreet events. You will walk beside me on Sunday afternoons when we go into town. You will serve as my cover wife to keep up appearances among the conservative circles I move in." He paused, as if weighing his next words. "Nothing more will be required of you. Nothing more will be offered to you. What if I want to leave?" The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Raphael studied her for a long moment, and Lara felt as if he were seeing right through her, reading thoughts that even she herself did not know. "You can't," he said finally. "Your father owes a lot of money to dangerous people. You're safe here." "Out there." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Lara felt the ground slip away from beneath her feet. So this was it. This wasn't just a transaction, it was forced protection. Her father had sold her to save his own skin, and she was a gilded prisoner in a mansion of secrets. "Are there rules?" he asked, surprising himself with the firmness of his own voice. "Some doors are locked. Do not attempt to open them. The library is always available, as is the garden, even though it is abandoned. Meals are served in the main hall at 8, 1 and 7. If you prefer to eat in your room, just let Donna Mercedes, the housekeeper, know. She will take care of everything you need." Raphael walked to the door, but stopped before leaving. "One last thing, Lara. Don't ask me about the past, and I won't. Ask about yours." When the door closed, Lara collapsed onto the bed and finally let the tears come. She clutched the locket tightly, as she always did when she felt lost. The small painting of the couple seemed more alive in the golden afternoon, light that streamed through the windows. The woman sleeping, the man awake and guilty. For the first time, Lara wondered if her mother had left this piece as a warning about men and their dangerous secrets. Night came slowly, bringing with it sounds she had never heard before. The wind in the ancient trees, the creaking of the house's wood, distant footsteps echoing through the hallways. Lara dined alone in her room, served by Donna Mercedes, a 60-year-old woman with kind eyes and calloused hands who spoke little but smiled a lot. When he finally tried to sleep, he couldn't. The bed was too comfortable, The silence was too heavy, and his mind couldn't stop processing everything that had happened. It was then that he heard music coming from somewhere in the house. Piano. A melancholic melody that seemed to tell a story of lost love. Lara stood up and walked over to the window. Down below, in the abandoned garden, she saw a figure walking among the wild rose bushes. It was Raphael, and even from a distance, she could see the weight he carried on his shoulders. The music suddenly stopped, and he looked up at her window. For a moment that lasted an eternity, they stared at each other through the darkness. Then Raphael disappeared into the shadows, leaving Lara with more questions than answers, and a strange feeling in her chest that she couldn't name. The first few days in the mansion passed like a haze. Lara woke up to the sun filtering through the lace curtains, drank coffee alone in her room, and spent her mornings exploring the corners of the house that were allowed. The library became her refuge. Among the dusty shelves, she found classics of Brazilian literature, romantic poetry, and history books that told the story of the region's coffee farms in the last century. She discovered that the Vasconcelos family had deep roots in that land, generations of powerful men who built empires on the sweat of others. Raphael was a ghostly presence. She caught glimpses of him in the hallways, always impeccable, always serious, always carrying that invisible weight on his shoulders. He didn't speak to her beyond what was necessary, a good morning when they passed each other in the hallway, a silent wave when she was reading in the garden. But Lara began to notice that he was watching her. She could feel his gaze when she was distracted, a warm weight on her back that made her turn around, only to find an empty window or a door closing. It was on Wednesday of the first week that she found the first note. It was on her pillow when she came back from lunch, a cream-colored piece of paper with elegant masculine handwriting. Loneliness is the only companion that never leaves us. Machado de Assis. Lara held the paper between her fingers, smelling the subtle perfume that emanated from it, something that smelled of wood and spices. She didn't know what it meant, but she put the note in the drawer of her dressing table. The next day, another note appeared, this time in the library, marking a specific page in a book of poems. There are women who are rare flowers born for secret gardens. There was no signature, but Lara knew who it was from. The words made her blush, and she wondered if Raphael knew the effect his messages had on her. The first time they had dinner together was by chance. Donna Mercedes had prepared a mushroom risotto that smelled divine, and when Lara went down to the main dining room, she found Raphael already seated at the head of the huge mahogany table. He gestured for her to sit, and she chose a chair in the middle, not too close and not too far away. "How are you adjusting?" he asked, cutting the meat with precise movements. "Well, thank you. The house is impressive." "It was my grandmother's. She said that a house only has a soul when there is music echoing through the halls." Raphael paused, as if remembering something distant. "It's been a long time since there was music here." Lara thought about the piano she had heard that first night, but said nothing. Instead, she decided to be brave. "Why did you buy me?" The question came out more bluntly than she intended, but she didn't regret it. Raphael stopped eating and looked her directly in the eyes for the first time since she had arrived. "Because your father owes me a lot of money, and because there are worse people than me interested in paying off that debt. And what are you? The lesser of two evils?" Something passed over Raphael's face, a shadow of something that might have been amusement if it hadn't been so melancholy. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a tired man trying to do the right thing for the first time in a long time." They finished dinner, in silence, but it was a different silence, less heavy, more intimate, as if a first barrier had been broken. It was after that night that the notes became more frequent. Raphael began leaving excerpts from books, coded phrases, and even old sheet music scattered around the places he knew Lara would go. It was his way of touching her without touching, of talking without speaking. And she, without understanding, why, began to respond. First, there was a red rose he found in the abandoned garden, left on the library table. Then, the reliquary purposely forgotten on the grand piano, he discovered in a locked room that Raphael had left open by mistake, or not. Small gestures that said more than words could express. The mansion, once cold and deserted, began to pulsate. As if the hallways were breathing again, as if the walls held sweeter secrets, Lara noticed that Raphael began to appear more often during the day. She would find him reading in the garden when she went for a walk, or playing the piano when she thought she wasn't listening. The music that came from his fingers was always melancholy, but there was a beauty in it that made Lara's heart race. 1. Afternoon, when the rain was beating down on the windows and the sky was pitch black, Lara was in the library when Raphael walked in. He seemed different, less in control, as if something was bothering him. "Do you play?" he asked, pointing to a piece of sheet music she was leafing through. "A little. My mother taught me before." "Before you leave," Raphael finished, and there was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. "Yes. Would you like to play something for me?" The invitation surprised her. Lara nodded and they walked together to the piano room. The instrument was magnificent, a black Steinway that reflected the light of the candles Raphael had lit. Lara sat on the bench and chose a simple piece, a waltz that her mother used to play on Sunday nights. As the first chords echoed through the room, Raphael closed his eyes. There was pain in his expression, but also something that could have been peace. Lara played like she had never played before, putting into music all the feelings she didn't know how to express with words. When she finished, the silence was broken only by the sound of rain outside. Raphael opened his eyes and looked at her, in a way that made Lara forget how to breathe. "Thank you," he said simply. That night, Lara found another note on her pillow. There are people who come into our lives like music in the silence. And for the first time since arriving at the mansion, she slept smiling. But what she didn't know was that Raphael couldn't sleep either. From his room, he could hear Lara moving, and every sound made her seem more real, more dangerous to the fragile balance he had built over the years. What had started as an act of protection was turning into something much more complicated and much more dangerous. The weeks turned into a month, and Lara began to recognize the rhythms of the mansion as if they were the beating of her own heart. She knew that Raphael woke up before dawn and spent an hour in his office before doing anything else. She knew that he drank black coffee without sugar and read 3 different newspapers every morning. She also knew that on Thursdays he left by car and only returned late in the afternoon, always with a more somber expression than when he left. What intrigued her most were the locked doors. There were at least 5 on the second floor, all with old heavy locks. Raphael never mentioned what was inside, and Donna Mercedes changed the subject whenever Lara asked. But curiosity was a fire that burned low, growing stronger every day. It was a Saturday afternoon, when Raphael had left for one of his mysterious trips and Donna Mercedes was in town shopping, that Lara decided to explore. She climbed the oak stairs with her heart pounding, her bare feet making no sound on the Persian carpet that covered the hallway. The first door she tried was indeed locked, as were the second and third. But the fourth door gave way with a soft click. The room that opened before her was like a sanctuary. Unlike the rest of the house, everything here was immaculately clean and organized. The pale blue silk curtains filtered the afternoon light, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. There was a 4-poster double bed covered in hand-embroidered sheets, and an antique dressing table with a mirror, the only mirror Lara had seen in the house. But what really caught his attention were the portraits, dozens of them, framed in silver and carefully arranged on every surface. It was always the same woman, honey blonde hair, clear green eyes, a sweet, serene smile. In some photos she was alone, in others she was next to Raphael, a younger Raphael who smiled genuinely and seemed to carry the world on his shoulders, not the weight of it. Lara approached the desk and found stacks of letters tied with red ribbon. Her hands trembled as she picked one up. The handwriting was feminine and delicate. "My dear Raphael, today I felt our son move for the first time." He will be just like his father, I'm sure, strong and stubborn like you. I love you more than the, stars Clara. The name echoed in Lara's mind like a funeral bell tolling. Clara. So this was the woman in the portraits, the owner of that room preserved like a mausoleum. And she was pregnant. Lara flipped through more letters, each one revealing pieces of a love story that seemed to have been cut in half. It was when he found the sheet music that his world fell apart. It was on the small piano in the corner of the room, a handwritten piece with a dedication on the first page. For Clara, who arrived too late, but arrived. With all my love, Raphael. And below, in different, more hurried handwriting, for those who arrived too late. But that wasn't all. On the back of the sheet music, he found something that made his blood run cold. A list of names written in pencil, some crossed out, others circled. And there, in the middle of the list, was his mother's name, Estela Mendez. Lara's hands shook so much she almost dropped the sheet music. Estela, her mother. What did she have to do with Clara and Raphael? Why was her name on a list in a dead woman's room? It was then that she heard footsteps in the hallway. Quick, decisive. Raphael had returned. Lara put everything away with desperate movements, but when she turned to leave, he was already at the door. The expression on Raphael's face was something she had never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly, but a mixture of pain, shock, and something that felt like betrayal. Her eyes scanned the room, noticing every detail out of place, every sign that her privacy had been violated. I told you some doors were locked for a reason, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The door wasn't locked, Lara replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. I shouldn't have come in here. Who was she? The question came out before Lara could stop herself. Who was Clara? Raphael closed his eyes as if each word were a blade. When he opened them again, there was a vulnerability in them that she had never seen before. Someone I loved. Someone who died because of me. And my mother. Why was her name on a list among Clara's things? The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael entered the room slowly, as if each step took an immense effort. He picked up the sheet music that Lara had leafed through and held it against his chest. Your mother, he began, then stopped as if the words were poison in his mouth. Your mother was Clara's friend. They met at a dance in Belo Horizonte more than 20 years ago. Estela was different, free in a way that Clara never was. And you what? I fell in love with her first. The confession fell between them like a bomb. Lara felt the ground slip away from beneath her feet. Her mother. Raphael had loved her mother before he loved Clara. Before anything. Estela was the one who introduced me to Clara, Raphael continued, his voice growing quieter. She said Clara was perfect for me, that I deserved someone pure, someone good, and Clara was all of those things. Sweet, kind, from a respectable family, while Estela was... He stopped, looking directly at Lara. She was married to your father. So, you chose Clara because you couldn't have my mother. I chose Clara because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I destroyed everything. As Raphael approached the window, looking out over the abandoned garden below, his voice, when he continued, was barely a whisper. Clara got pregnant. We were very happy planning our future, but I couldn't forget Estela. She would come to visit us, and every time I saw her, it was like a fire burning inside. One night, when Clara was visiting her family in Juiz de Fora, Estela came here. She was fighting with her father. She needed a place to stay. And God forgive me, but I couldn't resist. Lara felt nausea rising in her throat. The story was taking on directions she didn't want to know. Clara came back early from her trip. She found us together. The shock, the betrayal. She went into premature labor. We lost the baby, and 3 days later, we lost Clara too. Hemorrhage. The doctors said it was the stress, the emotional shock. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Raphael's heavy breathing. Lara watched him, seeing for the first time the man behind the mask. A man racked with guilt, haunted by choices he could not undo. What about my mother? She asked. though part of her didn't want to know the answer. She disappeared that same week. I never saw her again. Until today. Raphael turned to her, and Lara saw tears in the corners of his eyes. You have her eyes, you know, and the same way you tilt your head when you're thinking. When your father told me he had a daughter. You bought me because I remind you of my mother. I bought you because I thought it was my last chance to fix what I broke, to protect someone I couldn't protect before. The revelation hung heavy in the air like molten lead. Lara looked around Clara's room, at the portraits of the woman Raphael had loved and lost, at the love letters that would never be continued, and she realized that she was not a prisoner in this mansion. It was a living ghost of a past that Raphael could not bury. After the revelation in Clara's room, everything changed. Raphael became even more distant, as if having exposed his secrets made him too vulnerable to bear. He avoided Lara in the hallways, no longer left notes, and the piano remained silent. The mansion became a mausoleum again, but now Lara knew all, the ghosts that inhabited it. She spent days locked in her room processing everything she had discovered. Her mother had cheated on her father with Raphael. Clara had died because of that betrayal, and here she was, living amidst the wreckage of a tragedy that began before she was even born. The locket around her neck felt heavier now, as if it carried the weight of all the lies she had kept over the years. It was Donna Mercedes who finally brought her out of isolation. The woman entered the room one Thursday morning, carrying a tray of coffee and a determined look that would brook no argument. "Girl, you'll wither like a flower without sunlight if you keep going like this," he said, opening the curtains unceremoniously. "And Dr. Raphael is no better. Yesterday I found him sleeping in the office for the third time this week." "It's not my problem if he can't sleep," Lara replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Donna Mercedes sat on the edge of the bed, a maternal gesture that made Lara's eyes fill with tears. "Child, I have worked in this house for more than 15 years. I saw Dr. Raphael destroy himself when he lost Mrs. Clara and the baby. I saw him turn this house into a tomb, punishing himself every day for the mistakes of the past. And now I see him trying to save himself through you. He doesn't love me. I just remind him of my mother. And do you think that matters?" Donna Mercedes took Lara's hands in hers, rough but warm. "Love doesn't choose how it begins, girl. Sometimes it's born of guilt, sometimes of redemption. What matters is how it grows." That afternoon, Lara went down to the abandoned garden for the first time in a week. The place seemed even wilder, the rose bushes growing wildly, the stone fountain covered in fallen leaves. But there was a melancholy beauty to it, as if nature had decided to reclaim the space with its own version of perfection. It was there that Raphael found her. He appeared through the trees like a shadow, wearing only a white shirt with the sleeves, rolled up and dark pants. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a stubble that made him seem more human, less unapproachable. He stopped a few feet away, as if unsure whether he was welcome. "I thought you were gone," he said, his voice hoarse. "Where would I go?" "I don't know. Anywhere other than here." Lara continued pulling weeds from the base of the fountain, her hands already covered in dirt. It was pointless work, but she needed to do something, to move, to feel like she had control over something. In her life. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked without looking at him. "I want—" Raphael hesitated, then came over and knelt beside her, beginning to help with the weeds. "I want you to be happy. And I don't know if you can be happy here, in this place full of ghosts. What about you? Can you be happy here?" "I don't deserve to be happy." The answer was so low that Lara almost didn't hear it. She stopped working and finally looked at him. Raphael was focused on the ground, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were shaking slightly. "Why not?" "Because everything I touch is destroyed. Clara, your baby, your mother, and now you. I am not destroyed. Not yet." Lara dropped the weeds and turned fully to face him. Raphael finally looked up, and she saw in them a pain so deep it was almost physical. "Do. You think I'm like my mother?" The question took him by surprise. Raphael was silent for a long moment, studying Lara's face as if trying to decipher a code. "Physically, yes, you have the same eyes, the same smile, but—" He reached out, almost touching her face, but stopped. "Halfway. But you're stronger. Your mother was like water, flowing where it was easiest. You're like stone. You stand your ground even when everything around you crumbles." "Then why can't you see me? Why can't you only see her when you look at me?" Raphael closed his eyes as if the question was a punch in the stomach. "Because I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "To truly love you, to destroy you too." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy as the approaching storm. Lara could feel the electricity in the atmosphere, the smell of rain coming, and something else, something that pulsed between her and Raphael like a taut wire ready to snap. "What if I don't care about the risk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raphael opened his eyes and looked at her with an intensity that made Lara's heart stop. Slowly, very slowly, he reached out and touched her face. His skin was rough, but his touch was gentle enough to contrast with the hardness. "He carried Lara," he said, and for the first time her name sounded like a prayer on his lips. "I'm not my mother," she said, covering his hand with hers. "And you're not the man you were 20 years ago. Maybe it's time you stopped punishing yourself for mistakes you can't undo." The first drop of rain fell on Raphael's face, followed by others. In a matter of seconds, they were being wet by a summer rain that transformed the garden into a magical place. Raphael didn't move, didn't take his hand off Lara's face, didn't break the eye contact that bound them to each other. "If I kiss you now," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "there will be no going back. Do you understand that?" "I understand. What if I truly love you? Not as a replacement for someone else, but as you, Lara. Are you ready for that?" In response, she leaned forward and touched her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both testing unfamiliar ground. But then Raphael pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened, laden with months of pent-up tension, of loneliness and desire. When they pulled apart, they were both out of breath. The rain was falling harder now, soaking them completely, but neither of them cared. Raphael rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "God help me," she whispered, "but I love you. Not as I loved your mother, not as a substitute for Clara, but as Lara, my Lara." And for the first time since arriving at that mansion, Lara felt that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not as a prisoner, not as a living memory of other times, but as a woman loved by a man who had finally learned the difference between obsession and true love. But what they didn't know was that, at that very moment, a familiar car was driving up the dirt road that led to the mansion. Ajuel Mendez was returning, and he brought with him news that would test their newfound love in ways neither of them could have imagined. That night, after the rain and the kiss that changed everything, Lara and Raphael returned to the mansion, soaked but transformed. There was something different in the air, an electricity that had nothing to do with the storm that had passed. Raphael held her hand all the way to the front door, as if he feared she would disappear if he let go. "You should take a hot bath," he said as they entered the hall, but his voice was husky, laden with something deeper than concern. "And you, too?" Lara replied, noticing how Raphael's wet shirt stuck to his chest, revealing muscles she had never noticed before. They parted at the top of the stairs, each heading to his or her own room, but the air between them vibrated with a tension. That made Lara feel as if she were walking a tightrope. Under the hot shower, she couldn't stop thinking about the kiss, the way Raphael had whispered her name, the way his eyes had changed when they finally saw her, really saw her, as Lara, not as an echo of other women. When she emerged from the shower, wrapped in the silk robe she had found in the closet, there was a note under her door. But this time it was different. It wasn't verses from dead poets or cryptic phrases. It was just one line, written in the elegant handwriting she already knew by heart. "If you want me, I'll be waiting." Lara held the paper between her trembling fingers, feeling his scent permeating the paper. She knew where he would be, waiting. The piano room, the place where they had truly begun to get to know each other through music. The place where she had played and he had listened as if it were the first time he had heard a melody in his life. For a moment, she hesitated. She knew that if she went down those stairs, if she found Raphael in that room, there would be no going back. Everything between them would change forever. She would stop being the girl sold by her father and become a woman chosen by love. She would stop being a virgin and become a lover. The decision was hers, completely hers for the first time in a long time. Lara took off her robe and opened the closet. From among the dresses Raphael had made for her, she chose a simple but elegant white silk nightgown that fell like water over her body. She let down her hair, which fell in brown waves to her waist, and picked up the locket. For the first time, she opened it and studied the miniature inside. The couple painted there no longer seemed doomed. They seemed hopeful. The mansion was silent as she descended the stairs. Only the sound of her bare feet on the cool marble broke the silence. The door to the piano room was ajar, and she could see the golden light of the candles inside. Raphael had created an intimate, almost sacred atmosphere. He was standing beside the piano, wearing only dark trousers and a white shirt open at the chest. There was something vulnerable about him that she had never seen before. His hair disheveled, his expression less controlled, his hands shaking slightly as he watched her appear in the doorway. "You came," he said, as if he wasn't sure she would. "Show up." "I came." Raphael approached slowly, as if she were a wild animal that could flee at any sudden movement. When he stopped in front of her, Lara could feel the heat emanating from his body, the masculine scent of his clean skin. "Are you sure?" he asked, touching her face with his fingertips. "Because if we stay together tonight, I won't be able to pretend you're just my guest anymore. I won't be able to keep my distance." "I don't want you to keep your distance." "Lara." He closed, his eyes as if her name was a prayer. "You're a virgin." It wasn't a question, and she didn't deny it. She just nodded, feeling her cheeks heat up. "So it will be your first time, with a man who is over 40 years old, full of scars and ghosts. From the past. It will be my first time with the man I love." The confession escaped her lips before she could stop herself. Raphael opened his eyes in surprise, and she saw something break inside him, a barrier, a resistance he had been maintaining since day one. "You love me?" "I love." "Even though you know everything about my past with your mother, Clara's death, all the terrible things I've done? Mostly because of this, because you carried this pain alone for so long and you still managed to love me." Raphael pulled her into his arms then, kissing her with a passion that made Lara feel as if she were melting. His hands explored her body over the silk of her nightgown, awakening sensations she had never experienced before. When he lifted her into his arms and placed her on the piano, she did not protest. "You're so beautiful," he whispered against her neck, kissing the sensitive skin there. "More beautiful than any song I've ever played." Lara's hands found the buttons of his shirt, unbuttoning them with trembling fingers. She wanted to touch his skin, to know the scars he had mentioned, to trace with her fingers the body of the man she loved. When the shirt fell to the floor, she could see the marks, a long scar on his chest, another on his shoulder, stories written on his skin that she wanted to know all about. "How did you get those?" he asked, tracing the scar on his chest with his fingertip. "Car accident when I was 25. I almost died." He took her hand and kissed it. "Sometimes I think I should have died. I would have saved a lot of people a lot of suffering." "Don't say that. If you had died, we would never have met." "And you think that would have been a loss?" In response, Lara pulled him into a kiss that answered the question better than any words could. Raphael moaned against her lips, his hands, finding the straps of her nightgown, sliding them down her shoulders slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But Lara didn't want to change her mind. She wanted this, she wanted him. She wanted to give herself completely to the man she had learned to love, amidst the wreckage of her past. When the silk fell to the floor, exposing her body to the golden light of the candles, she felt no shame. She felt powerful, desired, loved. "My God, Lara," Raphael whispered, his eyes roaming every inch of her skin as if it were a work of art. "You're perfect." He kissed her then with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. There was no rush in his movements, only adoration. His hands and mouth explored every part of her body, awakening sensations she had never known existed. When they finally came together, Lara understood why this was called making love. It wasn't just physical desire, it was a communion of souls. It was the merging of two wounded people finding healing in each other. It was Raphael finally breaking free from the shadows of his past, and Lara discovering that she could be loved for who she truly was. Afterwards, lying on the Persian rug in front of the piano, their bodies intertwined and their hearts beating, in rhythm, Raphael traced gentle circles on Lara's back. "I don't regret it," she said, as if guessing his thoughts. "Even if it complicates everything?" "Mainly because of that." Raphael laughed softly, a sound she had never heard from him before, a sound of genuine happiness. "What is it?" she asked. "I was thinking my grandmother was right. A house only has a soul when there is music echoing." Through the halls, he kissed the top of her head. "And you, my love, are the most beautiful music that has ever echoed through here." That night, for the first time in months, neither of them dreamed of ghosts from the past. They dreamed only of each other, and of a future that finally seemed possible. But outside the mansion, hidden among the trees, João Mendes watched the illuminated windows of the piano room, and the smile that appeared on his face had nothing paternal about it. It had everything of a man who had just found exactly the leverage he needed to get what he wanted. Lara woke up in Raphael's arms for the first time in her life, and for a moment she forgot where she was. The golden morning. Light filtered through the curtains of the piano room, creating dancing patterns on the floor where they had slept in each other's arms. Raphael's body was warm against hers, his arm around her waist as if, even in sleep, he wanted to protect her from the world. She moved gently so as not to wake him, and she could see his face relaxed with sleep. The lines of tension that always marred his expression were gone, and he looked younger, almost vulnerable. A strand of hair fell across his forehead, and Lara resisted the urge to brush it away. She wanted to burn this moment into her memory, the first morning of their lives as true lovers. It was the sound of tires on the stone road that broke the magic of the moment. Raphael woke instantly, every muscle twitching in alert. His years of experience with danger had created reflexes that not even love could completely numb. "Someone's coming," he said, quickly getting up and searching for the clothes scattered on the floor. Lara felt a chill in her stomach. She hurriedly put on her nightgown while Raphael went to the window. What she saw outside made her face harden in a way she hadn't seen in weeks. "Who is it?" she asked, but deep down she already knew. "Your father." João Mendes was thinner than when Lara had last seen him, with rumpled clothes and a scruffy beard that made him look desperate. But his eyes had the same calculating gleam as always, and when Donna Mercedes led him into the main room, he smiled in a way that made Lara shiver. "My daughter," he said, opening his arms as if expecting a warm embrace. "How beautiful you are. Life here has done you good." Lara didn't move from her place next to Raphael, who had positioned himself slightly in front of her, in an instinctive, protective posture. "What do you want, João?" Raphael's voice was cold as ice, without any trace of the tenderness Lara had known the night before. "What kind of way is that to welcome the father of your guest?" John smiled, but there was malice in that smile. "Can't I visit my own daughter?" "You can speak now," Raphael said. "We both know you didn't come here out of fatherly concern." João laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the room. He walked over to one of the leather armchairs and sat down uninvited, crossing his legs as if he owned the house. "You've always been straightforward, Raphael. It's one of the things I admire about you." He took a cigarette out of his pocket and lit it, ignoring Donna Mercedes's disapproving look. "I'm in trouble, big trouble." "And since when is that news?" This time it's different. The Moreiras are losing their patience. The name made Raphael tense. Lara noticed how his hands clenched into fists, how a vein bulged in his temple. Whoever the Moreiras were, they were people even Raphael feared. You must have lost your mind. To get mixed up with them, Raphael said. I had no choice. After you disappeared from the business, I had to find other partners. John took a long drag on his cigarette. But they're not as understanding as you were. They want the money. All of it, with interest. As we am 5 million. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Lara saw Raphael close his eyes for a moment, processing the information. You're more of an idiot than I thought, he said finally. Maybe, but you're going to help me. I am not going. João smiled then, and Lara knew they had arrived at the real reason for their visit. Yes, it will. Because if it doesn't, I'm going to tell the Moreiras a very interesting story about a certain respectable businessman who has a 19-year-old girl living in his house, a girl he bought from his own father. He looked directly at Lara. A girl who, from what I could see last night, is serving a purpose other than just keeping company at social events. Lara's blood ran cold. He had been watching. He had seen everything. You're a disgusting worm, Raphael said, stepping forward. I'm a worried father, João replied, without losing his smile, and I think that the people of Minas Gerais would be very interested in knowing that the respected Rafael Vasconcelos keeps a sex slave on his property. A minor, the daughter of a man he blackmails. I'm 19, Lara said, finding her voice. I'm not underage. My dear child, John turned to her with an expression of mock concern. Do you think that matters? What matters is perception, and the perception is that you have been sold as a commodity, that you are here against your will, that you are being abused by a powerful man who uses his position to take advantage of defenseless young women. That's not true. The truth is irrelevant. What matters is what people will believe when the story leaks to the press, and believe me, it will leak. Raphael was so tense that Lara could feel the anger rolling off him in waves, but she could also see the calculation behind his eyes, the businessman weighing all the options and coming to the same inevitable conclusion. What exactly do you want? He asked. The 5 million, and Lara comes home with me. No. The word came out of Lara like a scream. I'm not going anywhere with you. John looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and irritation. My daughter, you have no choice. Either you come back to me for good, or this whole story will turn into a scandal that will destroy both you and your protector. He paused dramatically. And when the Moreiras find out where Raphael hides his money, well, let's just say they have their own methods of collecting. It was then that Lara understood the true extent of the trap. It wasn't just blackmail. It was a death sentence for both of them. If Raphael paid, he would be admitting guilt and putting himself in the Moreiras' sights forever. If he didn't pay, the story would become public and destroy them socially, in addition to leaving João in the criminals' sights. There is a third option, Raphael said slowly. Which? I'll tell the Moreiras exactly where you are. John's smile faltered for the first time. You wouldn't do that. Don't test me, John. You know my history. You know what I'm capable of when cornered. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Lara could feel the two forces measuring each other, two dangerous men playing a deadly game with her life. At the center, it was John who gave in first. Okay, he said, stubbing out his cigarette on the arm of the chair. How about a deal? 3 million. And Lara stays, but you sign a document acknowledging that she's here of her own free will. A marriage contract, perhaps? Lara felt her world spin. Marriage? Raphael looked at her and she saw the question in his eyes. It was the perfect solution. It would protect them both legally and give legitimacy to their relationship. But it would also be a marriage born of blackmail, not love. I need to think, Raphael said. You have until tomorrow. The Moreiras arrive in Barbacena on Friday. If I don't have a solution by then... João didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. After he left, Lara and Raphael were left alone in the room, the weight of the decision hanging between them like a toxic cloud. Raphael, she began, but he interrupted her. No, he said, pulling her into his arms. We're not going to make any decisions now, not under pressure, not out of fear. But if we don't do something, let's find another way. There is always another way. But even as he kissed her, trying to chase away the ghosts that had come, back to haunt them, Raphael knew that some situations didn't have easy ways out, and that sometimes love wasn't enough to overcome all obstacles. That night, for the first time since they had given themselves to each other, they slept separately, each in their own room, each trying to find a solution that did not exist. The next morning brought with it a tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the mansion. Lara had barely slept, tormented by nightmares of being torn from Raphael's arms by men in dark suits. When she went down for breakfast, she found him in his office on the phone talking quietly to someone on the other end of the line. "Yes, I understand the risks. No, there is no other way. I need all the information I can get about them." Raphael hung up when he saw her and tried to smile, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Who are the Moreiras?" asked Lara, getting straight to the point. Raphael sighed, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of tiredness that she was learning to recognize. A family that controls much of the organized crime in the interior of Minas Gerais. Loans, illegal gambling, smuggling. They have tentacles in everything. He stood up and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. "I used to launder money for them a long time ago, before Clara, before everything fell apart." "Why did you stop?" "Because after Clara died, I realized that the dirty money in my hands had contributed to destroying everything I loved. I tried to get out of the business, but they didn't like it. I had to negotiate my way out." Lara approached him, touching his arm lightly. "What kind of negotiation?" "I gave information about other partners. I helped them eliminate the competition in exchange for my freedom." Raphael's voice was thick with self-loathing. "It wasn't my best moral phase. And now they can come back to you through my father." "Yes." John was always too small to attract attention, but 5 million, that's enough money to make anyone a priority. Lara processed the information, trying to understand all the implications. There were layers of danger she hadn't even imagined, a past that refused to stay buried. "Raphael," she said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you. About my mother." He turned to her, surprised by the change of subject. "What about her?" "Last night before my father arrived, I was thinking about everything you told me, about how she disappeared after Clara died." Lara hesitated, as if the next words were difficult to say. "I think I know where she went." Raphael stood still. "Like this?" Lara went to the locket she always wore around her neck and carefully opened it. Inside, besides the miniature of the couple she had always known, there was a small secret compartment that she had discovered by chance a few days before. From there, she took out a tiny piece of paper, folded several times. "I found this inside. The reliquary. It's an address in São Paulo and a date, 3 months after Clara's death." Raphael took the paper with trembling hands. The address was of a private clinic in the south of São Paulo, known for treating women in delicate situations. "My God," he whispered, "she was pregnant." From who? The question hung in the air. Between them, loaded with implications that neither of them wanted to face. Raphael slumped into a chair, the paper still between his fingers. "If she was pregnant when she disappeared, and if the date matches when we were together." He couldn't finish the sentence. "You can have a child, Raphael. A child with my mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Lara watched Raphael process the information, watched as the full realization dawned on him. If he had a child with Estella, it changed everything. Not just about the past, but about the present, about them. "That means you can be." Raphael couldn't say the words. "Your half-sister," Lara added, her voice barely above a whisper. It was as if the world had collapsed once again. Yesterday they were lovers, discovering true love. Today they could be siblings who had unknowingly committed incest. Fate seemed to have a cruel taste for impossible ironies. "No," Raphael said, standing up abruptly. "No, that can't be true. I would remember if. What would you remember? A night with my mother 20 years ago. A night you yourself said you tried to forget because you felt guilty. Raphael began to pace the room like a caged animal. Lara could see the calculations forming in his mind, the dates being reviewed, the possibilities being analyzed. The clinic, he said finally. We need to go to the clinic. Check the records. Raphael. No. He turned to her with an intensity that frightened her. I will not accept this. I will not accept that fate would be so cruel as to give us this love, only to show us that it is forbidden. What if it's true? Then we'll face that too. But first, let's be sure. Before they could argue further, Donna Mercedes appeared at the door with a worried expression. Dr. Raphael, there are some men here who want to speak to you. They said they are from the Moreira family. Lara's blood ran cold. Raphael also turned pale but quickly recovered. How many? 3. They're waiting in the living room. Take Lara to her room and lock the door. Don't come out until I come get her. Raphael, no. Go, Lara, please. She saw in his eyes that there was no room for argument. She followed Donna Mercedes up the stairs, but when they reached the second floor, the housekeeper pulled her aside. Girl, there's a back staircase that leads to the garden. If things get ugly down there, you run. Got it? Lara nodded, but she knew she wouldn't run. She wouldn't let Raphael face this alone, even if it meant putting her own life at risk. From her room, she could hear muffled voices coming from downstairs. One of them was Raphael's, controlled but tense. The others were unfamiliar, harsh, threatening. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone made it clear that they weren't friendly conversations. It was when she heard the crash of something breaking that Lara made her decision. She left the room silently and went down the main staircase, stopping in a position where she could see the room without being seen. 3 men in suits surrounded Raphael. One of them, taller and with a scar that ran from his ear to his chin, held a revolver discreetly at his side. Raphael stood, his hands raised in a posture of surrender, but his eyes shone with a restrained anger that Lara had never seen before. You know why we are here, Vasconcelos, the man with the scar said. João Mendes told us a very interesting story about you, and a certain merchandise he sold you. Lara is not a commodity. To us, anything that can be bought and sold is a commodity, and it seems you have become very fond of your acquisition. What do you want? We want you to pay off John's debt, 5 million, and we want you to come back to work with us. Your money laundering talents are sorely missed. I got out of that business. Nobody leaves our business, Raphael. You should know that. It was then that Lara realized that her father's blackmail was just the beginning. The Moreiras didn't just want the money. They wanted Raphael back in the organization, and they would use any means necessary to get it, including her. We have a proposition, the scarred man continued. You come back to work with us, and the girl stays safe. You refuse, and, well, it would be a shame if something happened to such a pretty little girl. That's when Raphael lost control. He lunged at the nearest man, but before he could do anything, the sound of a gunshot echoed through the mansion. Lara screamed, running down the stairs without thinking about the consequences. When she reached the living room, she found Raphael on the floor, holding his shoulder where blood was dripping between his fingers. The 3 men watched her with smiles that chilled her blood. Perfect, said the one with the scar. Now we can start the real negotiations. Raphael's blood formed a red pool on the marble floor of the room. Lara knelt beside him, pressing her hands against the wound in his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely apply adequate pressure. Raphael, stay with me, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Please, stay with me. He opened his eyes with effort, focusing on her with difficulty. Her skin was pale, her lips losing their color. Lara, you shouldn't have come down. What a touching scene, said the scarred man, tucking his gun into his vest. But let's get down to business. Raphael, I hope you understand now that we are serious. Raphael tried to get up, but Lara held him down, whispering for him to stay still. The wound looked serious, but not fatal. They had shot to intimidate. Not kill, not yet. What exactly do you want? Lara asked, surprising everyone with the firmness in her voice. The three men looked at each other as if they hadn't expected her to speak. The young lady has courage, said one of them, a short, fat man with gold teeth. I like that. Answer my question. The one with the scar smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We want your boyfriend here to come back to work with us. His money laundering services are unique, and we want the $5 million that Daddy owes us. What if he accepts? Then, everyone is happy. He works for us. You become our guarantor that he won't try to cheat us again, and everyone lives a long and prosperous life. What if he doesn't accept? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any threat. Lara understood that they had no real choice. It was either accept or die. It was then that Raphael, gathering strength he didn't know he had, managed to support himself on his elbow. There is a third option, he said, his voice hoarse with pain. Speak. I'll pay the $5 million. Immediately, and you leave Lara alone forever. And in return, I'll come back with you. I'll work for the organization for as long as you want. But Lara is free. No! Lara's scream echoed through the room. Raphael, don't do this. He looked at her with a tenderness that broke her heart. It's the only way, my love. Interesting, said the one with the scar. But how do we know you won't try to run away again? Raphael smiled, a bitter smile that carried the weight of all his losses. Because this time I have something to lose that's worth more than my life. And you know where to find it. The negotiation that followed was conducted as coolly as any other business deal. Raphael would transfer the $5 million immediately, using his banking contacts. Then he would leave with them, leaving instructions that Lara would be taken care of. The mansion would be hers, as would a bank account with enough money so that she would never want for anything. But if you try to deceive us, said the one with the scar, the young lady will pay the price. I understand. Donna Mercedes was called to take care of Raphael's wound while he made the necessary calls. Lara remained by his side, holding his free hand, trying to absorb every second they had together. There's something I need to give you, Raphael said when the men had momentarily left the room. With his good hand, he pulled a small gold key from his pocket. It's for the safe in the office. Inside are documents, including birth certificates, and there's a letter I wrote for you, in case something like this ever happened. Lara took the key with trembling hands. Raphael, I can't let you go. You can and you will, because this is not the end, Lara. I will find a way to get back to you. What if you can't? He touched her face with his injured hand, staining her cheek with blood. Then you will live. You will be happy. You will find someone who can love you without putting your life in danger. I don't want anyone else. I just want you. And I just want you. More than anything I've ever wanted in my life. That's why I need to protect you. The men returned, impatient. The transfers had been confirmed. The $5 million were in the right accounts. It was time to leave. Raphael, Lara said as he struggled to his feet, about what we discovered today, about the possibility of us being— It doesn't matter, he interrupted her. Even if we are blood brothers, even if it is forbidden, even if it is a sin, I love you, and I will continue to love you until the last day of my life. He kissed her then, a desperate kiss filled with all the love he didn't know when he would be able to express again. Lara clung to him, trying to memorize the taste of his lips, the smell of his skin, the feeling of being in his arms. Enough romance, said the one with the scar. It's time. Raphael walked away from Lara slowly, as if each step cost him a part of his soul. At the door he turned around one last time. Open the safe, he said, and remember, sometimes true love demands sacrifice, but it never gives up. After they left, taking Raphael and leaving only the echo of their words, Lara fell to the floor of the living room, sobbing like she had never sobbed in her life. Donna Mercedes found her like that hours later, still holding the golden key against her chest. Come, girl, the housekeeper said kindly. Let's see what Dr. Raphael has left for you. The safe in the office contained exactly what Raphael had promised: legal documents that made her the owner of the mansion and a considerable sum of money. Birth certificates, including one she had never seen, with the name of a child born in Sao Paulo 9 months after Clara's death, a child registered as Estela Mendez's son with an unknown father. And a letter. "My dear Lara," it began, in the elegant handwriting she knew so well. "If you are reading this, it means that my past has finally caught up with me, as I always knew it would. But I want you to know that the days I spent with you were the happiest of my life. You taught me that it is possible to love again, that it is possible to forgive yourself, that it is possible to start over even when all seems lost." The letter went on for pages, detailing practical instructions on how to manage the properties and money, but also declarations of love that made Lara cry until she had no more tears. "I don't know if we are blood brothers or not," one of the passages read, "but I do know that we are soulmates destined to meet in any life under any circumstance. If I can make it back to you, we will spend the rest of our lives discovering the truth together. If I can't, know that my last thought will always be your name." The letter ended with a promise. "Wait for me, my love. Somehow, I will find a way back home to you." That night, alone in the mansion that was now hers, Lara went up to the room that had been Clara's. She pulled the sheets off the pictures, revealing the portraits of the blonde woman Raphael had loved before her. But instead of jealousy, she felt a strange solidarity. They had both loved the same impossible man. They had both paid the price for that love. He opened the locket and looked at the miniature of the couple, the woman sleeping, the man awake and guilty. For the first time, he fully understood what the image meant. It wasn't about guilt or remorse. It was about wakefulness. About a love that doesn't sleep, that stays awake, protecting the one it loves, even when the beloved doesn't know it. Raphael was out there, in danger, sacrificing himself for her, and she would be here, awake, waiting, no matter how long it took, no matter the risks, no matter if they were siblings. Some loves were bigger than the rules of the world, and theirs was one of those loves. 3 months later, when autumn was painting the leaves of the mansion gold and red, Lara received a call that would change everything once again. An unknown female voice, asking if she was Estela Mendez's daughter, was his mother. Alive in Sao Paulo, she finally wanted to tell the whole truth about her past, and about the son she had abandoned to protect from a world that was not ready to accept him. The world was about to change again, but this time Lara was ready to face any truth, as long as in the end she could have Raphael back in her arms. The trip to Sao Paulo was like going back in time. Lara held Raphael's letter to her chest as the bus drove through the roads of Minas Gerais, taking her to meet a mother she hadn't seen in 7 years, and to truths that could change everything. The address Estela had given over the phone was in an elegant neighborhood in the South Zone, very different from the simple life Lara had always known. The woman who opened the door was a more mature version of the young woman in the portraits Lara had seen in Clara's room. Estela was 42 now, with brown hair streaked with grey, but the same green eyes Lara saw in the mirror. There was an elegance about her that spoke of a comfortable life, but also a deep sadness that no amount of money could disguise. "My daughter," Estela said, tears already streaming down her face. "How you've grown. How beautiful you've become." The embrace that followed was filled with 7 years of longing, regret, and repressed love. Lara felt like a child again, protected in the arms of a mother she had thought she had lost forever. The apartment where Estela lived was luxurious, but it had the air of a place where someone hid rather than lived. There were paintings on the walls, fresh flowers in the vases, but there was no human warmth. It was as if she were merely existing there, not living. "I need to tell you everything," Estela said, as they sat in the living room, still holding Lara's hands, as if she was afraid she would disappear. "About what happened with Raphael, about why I abandoned you, about my brother?" Estela stopped mid-sentence, surprised. "How do you know about Gabriel?" Gabriel. Finally, the boy had a name. Lara told her mother everything she had discovered. The reliquary, the address of the clinic, the birth, records in Raphael's safe. Estella listened in silence, tears falling freely. "I was pregnant when I left Barbacena," Estella confirmed, "pregnant with Raphael. But his father, João, never knew. He thought the child was his because we were fighting, but we were still married. When I found out I was expecting a child from the man who had destroyed Clara's life, I knew I couldn't stay. So Gabriel is really my half-brother, and Raphael's." "Yes, and he's here, Lara, in São Paulo. He's a young man of 20 now, a medical student, intelligent, kind, with his father's eyes but a heart that I hope is better than ours." The revelation brought relief and pain at the same time. Relief because she now knew the complete truth. Pain because it meant that she and Raphael really were siblings, united by a blood bond that made their love impossible in the eyes of the world. "Does he know about Raphael?" Lara asked. "You know that your father is a powerful man who cannot know you, but you don't know his name." Estella hesitated. "Lara, there is something else I need to tell you, about why I called you now after so long." It was then that Estella told her about the call she had received 3 days earlier, a man identifying himself as an associate of Raphael, saying that he was in trouble and needed help. The man knew about Gabriel, about Estella's past with Raphael, about everything. He said Raphael is being held against his will, forced to work for criminals, and that the only way to save him is to gather information about these people, evidence that can be used against them. And do you believe this man? He knew things that only Raphael could know, details about our relationship, about the night Gabriel was conceived. And he gave me a message from Raphael. Estella went to the table and picked up a piece of paper. He said that Raphael asked me to tell you that the rose bushes in the garden need care to bloom again. Lara felt her heart race. It was a reference to the abandoned garden of the mansion where they had kissed for the first time. Only Raphael would know what those words meant to her. "What does this man want us to do?" "Have Gabriel get close to the Moreiras. As a medical student, he can offer discreet services to the organization, treat injuries they can't take to hospitals, that sort of thing. Once inside, he can gather information, find out where Raphael is being held." "This is crazy. It's too dangerous." "Maybe. But it's the only chance we have to save the man we both love." Meeting Gabriel was like looking at a young version of Raphael. He was the same height, the same dark hair, the same intense eyes, but there was a lightness about him that Raphael had long since lost, a hope that had not yet been shattered by life. "So you're my sister," he said when Estella made the introductions. "And you're in love with our father." "Gabriel," Estella scolded. "It's okay, Mom, I understand." Gabriel looked at Lara with a compassion that surprised her. "Love doesn't choose circumstances. And if Daddy saved you, if he took care of you when no one else cared, then he can't be as bad as Mommy always said." It was Gabriel who came up with the final plan. As a medical student with excellent grades, he could easily land a position at a private clinic that served discreet clients. From there, it would only be a matter of time before the Moreiras would need his services. Once inside the organization, he could locate Raphael and find evidence to hand them over to the police. "And then?" asked Lara. "Then you can be together," Gabriel replied simply. "Blood brothers or not, you love each other, and life is too short to waste true love because of social conventions." The plan took 6 months to execute. 6 months during which Lara returned to the mansion in Barbacena and waited, tending the garden, playing the piano, reading Raphael's letters over and over again. 6 months of receiving coded reports from Gabriel, who had managed to infiltrate the organization and was slowly mapping its operations, until the call she was waiting for came. "I found him," Gabriel said, "and I have everything we need to take them down." The police operation took place in the early hours of December. Lara was in São Paulo at the police station when Raphael was brought in. He was thinner, with a long beard and eyes that had seen too much. But when he saw her waiting, everything in him lit up as if the sun had suddenly risen. "Lara," he whispered, and she ran into his arms. The reunion was intense, desperate, filled with months of longing and fear. They kissed as if the world was going to end, as if that moment was all they had. "I thought I'd never see you again," Raphael said against her lips. "I knew you'd come back. I knew it." It was only later, when they were alone in a room at the police station, that Gabriel appeared. The moment when father and son saw each other for the first time was silent, filled with 20 years of absence and regret. "Gabriel," Raphael said, his voice breaking, "my son." "Daddy." The hug that followed healed wounds that Lara didn't even know existed. Raphael finally met the son he never knew he had, and Gabriel finally had the father he always wanted to know. "You are siblings," Gabriel said to Lara when they parted, "but you are also two people who love each other, and in my medical and human opinion, that is more important than any blood bond." 6 months later, on a summer afternoon when the rose bushes in the garden were finally blooming in all their glory, Lara and Raphael were married in a simple ceremony at the mansion. Estella was there, beaming at the sight of her happy daughter. Gabriel served as best man, proud to unite two people who had fought so hard to be together. "I don't care if it's right or wrong in the eyes of the world," Raphael said during the vows. "I just know that you are my soulmate, my redemption, my home, and I will love you until the last day of my life." "And I will love you beyond life," Lara replied, "because some loves are bigger than rules, bigger than time, bigger than anything the world could ever try to put between us." They had children, 3 beautiful children who grew up knowing that their parents' love had overcome all obstacles. Gabriel became a respected doctor and married a colleague who loved her unconventional family. Estella finally found peace, living part of the year in the mansion, helping to care for her grandchildren. And every night Raphael would play the piano for Lara in the same room where they had first given themselves to each other. The music echoed through the halls of the mansion, giving it soul like Raphael's grandmother had always said it should have. "Do you regret it?" Lara asked one of those nights, nestled in his arms after 20 years of marriage. "Than? Of everything we've been through, of all the suffering." Raphael kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Never, because every pain, every obstacle, every terrible moment has brought us here, and here is the only place I want to be. Even though we know we're brothers." Mainly because of that. Because it proves that our love is greater than any convention, any rule, anything the world might try to impose on us. We chose to love each other, Lara, and that choice made us stronger than any blood bond. That night, like every other, they slept in each other's arms, two hearts that had found their home in each other. And if the world judged them, if they whispered about the strange couple in the mansion in the mountains, it didn't matter. Because sometimes true love doesn't ask for permission. It just happens, transforms everything around it, and becomes the only truth that matters. And the only truth about Lara and Raphael was that they loved each other, completely, intensely, eternally, forever.